Welcome to this video about A Doll's House by Ibsen. I'm going to be focusing on the analysis of Act 2 in this video, and the video is mainly aimed at A-level students. I'm going to start by just going through the chronology of the act in terms of the plot, and then I'll finish by going through some other significant things like context and language and characterization. So the act begins with a description of the Christmas tree and the stage directions as being dishevelled and basically stripped of all decorations. And it means that Christmas is now coming to an end. And that Christmas tree can also be a metaphor for the condition of the atmosphere of the home. The pretense and decorations have gone, and what has been left behind is the bare bones of the Christmas tree and the bare reality of the plant, of the tree, and that, of course, metaphorically links to the quality of their marriage and the standard of their marriage slowly decaying as well. Nora and the nurse character Anne Marie discuss how Anne Marie gave up her baby so she could find work and be Nora's nurse and nanny. And it follows a long line of examples in this play where females have been presented as sacrificial characters who have had to give something up in this macho world of respectability and work. So Mrs. Lind, Nora, and Anne Marie have all had to sacrifice something at some point, and life has not really, therefore, been kind to each of them, particularly when you think about the situation that Nora finds herself in with Krogstad and what happens at the end of the play. Um, as we know from Act 1, Krogstad has said by this point, if I lose my job at the bank, Nora, then I'm going to bring you down with me, meaning I'm going to tell Halmer everything about the loan you took out without him knowing. And that's not only, of course, serious because she's committed forgery, but it's also serious because she's a woman. And this was a time when women were not supposed to have much financial control or independence, particularly if they were married to a man. So finance and business was very much within the man's domain. And of course, in that conversation, Halmer refuses to give Krogstad his job back to the bank, in the bank, because he's already given that job to Mrs. Lind, which is something else that Nora wanted. So by this point, Nora knows that there's trouble ahead because Krogstad has indeed been sacked from the bank. Halmer does not like the fact that Krogstad is over familiar. He does not like the fact that this crooked man calls Halmer Torvald by his first name, and therefore Halmer wants to get rid of that kind of irritant now that he's manager of that bank. And that, of course, doesn't bode well for Nora or indeed their marriage. So there's a real sense at this point of time counting down. At the end of that conversation, Nora calls Halmer petty, and it's being irritated by that the letter is posted to Krogstad, which tells Krogstad about his dismissal from the bank, and that's of course going to have repercussions. To break the tension a little bit, maybe, Dr. Rank comes round, and he and Nora begin to flirt. You have that episode with the silk stockings. He admits that he doesn't have long to live, and at the end of that conversation, amid the intimacy of the falling darkness and subsequent candlelight, he declares his love for her. And from that point on, Nora feels that he cannot ask him a favour and ask for help. Krogstad arrives, angry about his sacking. This is, of course, after Dr. Rank has left. And at this point, desperate as she is, Nora goes to the extent of contemplating suicide as the only option. And Krogstad says, I've thought about that too, but you're too cowardly to do it. And Nora kind of agrees. So both Krogstad and Nora have contemplated suicide in the past, but neither of them, of course, end up doing so. It goes to show how desperate Nora is in this situation. Next, Krogstad, angry and following through with his threat that if I lose my job at the bank, you're coming down with me, he posts a letter into the locked letterbox in which he informs Helmer of what Nora has done with the loan. And because that letterbox is locked and Nora does not have the key, she cannot get the letter back. And of course, that letter really is a motif or symbol of truth and the catalyst for the end of the marriage between Helmer and Nora. I think she does try to use a hairpin to open the box, but she is unsuccessful. And the act finishes with Mrs. Lynde saying, I'll go and talk to Krogstad and try and get the letter back, try and persuade him to have a bit of humanity, perhaps. But at the same time as all of this is happening, Nora attempts to rehearse the tarantella dance. She rehearses it chaotically, her hair falls down, and of course, she make believes that she has forgotten all of Helmer's dance instructions, and she's going a bit freestyle and dancing a bit like a maniac. And of course, this probably is her trying to distance herself from the reality of what's coming up in the third and final act, her trying to reclaim some last kind of um, resemblance, I suppose, of their marriage by going to this party. So that is how the act finishes. And the act finishes at the end with Nora saying things like 12 hours, 17 hours, 30 hours, this kind of stuff. So the audience, again, is very much reminded through the language at the end of this idea of a sense of impending doom, which of course heightens the sense of suspense as we await to see if Helmer does in fact read the letter that's waiting for him in the letterbox. So just to finish off, that is the chronology of the act, that's what happens. But just to finish off again, around the outside, some certain things that might be of use if students are going to be talking about Act 2 in any kind of essay. Again, I'm not going to go through all of this because I think it's fairly self-explanatory, but just to pick on maybe 3 or 4 of them. Um, the speech features, such as false starts, interruptions, pauses, and so on, show that Nora has a very kind of emotional and erratic state of mind as she reacts mentally to what this information and what this letter means for her. The locked mailbox shows her lack of control because she cannot escape it. There's nothing that she can do to get that letter back once it's been posted. But interestingly, Nora, in terms of that costume, very similar to the Christmas tree that's decorated. This idea of decorating Nora like a doll in a costume that she admits that she would like to tear up into 1,000 pieces, as if to shatter the illusion of her kind of housewife characterization. Finally, Dr. Rank blames his father's lifestyle for his spinal problem. And it was believed at the time that STDs such as syphilis was passed down genetically to children from parents that lived maybe quite recklessly. So Dr. Rank says to Nora in that scene with the falling darkness and the silk stockings that he is having to bear the consequences of his father's lifestyle, because that was the belief at the time. And that's why there's lots of euphemism, perhaps, to champagne and oysters and foie gras to kind of represent that kind of wealthy, excessive lifestyle, which he is now paying the price for. And I would also argue that Dr. Rank's spinal difficulties and his disability and his impending sense of mortality is also used as a metaphor in this play to show how children often have to bear the consequences of flawed parents. Of course, Helmer accuses Nora of being a spender and a reckless spender at that, like her father. So there's almost a cyclical significance there. So that is a summary of Act 2, as well as a discussion of some of the significance, language, context, and characterization and theme. Hopefully that was useful. Again, there's a video like this for Act 1 and a video like this for Act 2. So if you want to view those videos, please do. Hopefully that was useful, and thank you very much for watching.